There's a certain kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from carrying something unfinished for days, sometimes weeks. A message you still haven't replied to, a project sitting quietly in the background of your mind, a task so small it should take 10 minutes, but somehow feels impossible to begin. And what makes it stranger is that you're thinking about it constantly.
People often imagine avoidance as indifference, but usually the people who procrastinate the most are the ones who care the most. They replay responsibilities in their head before bed. They mentally rehearse conversations that never happen. They feel the weight of unfinished things even during moments that are supposed to feel relaxing.
From the outside, it can look like laziness, a lack of discipline, poor time management. But that interpretation misses something important. Because for many people, procrastination is not a productivity problem. It's an emotional one. And there's far more going on beneath it than most people realize. What we call procrastination is often the nervous system trying to protect someone from an internal experience that feels overwhelming. Not the task itself, the feeling attached to the task. Psychologists have studied this for years. Research from behavioral science and neuroscience consistently shows that procrastination has less to do with laziness and more to do with emotional regulation. In brain scans, the parts of the mind associated with threat detection and discomfort often become highly active when a person anticipates certain responsibilities. Which explains something people rarely talk about. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't doing the thing. It's facing what the thing might make you feel. Failure, exposure, judgment, uncertainty, even success. Especially for people who learned early in life that mistakes carried emotional consequences. There are people who grew up in environments where performance became tied to safety. Maybe praise only came when they achieved something. Maybe mistakes were criticized quickly. Maybe emotions were dismissed, but expectations remained high. Over time, the nervous system adapts. It begins treating effort as something emotionally risky. And eventually, even simple tasks can start carrying invisible emotional weight. Not because the person is incapable, but because their brain quietly learned that action can lead to shame, pressure, disappointment, or loss of control. So the mind delays, not randomly, strategically. The strange thing about procrastination is that it often looks irrational from the outside while making complete sense internally. If beginning something risks emotional discomfort, the brain searches for temporary relief instead. Scrolling, cleaning, watching videos, planning excessively, waiting for the right mood. Not because the person wants distraction more than progress, but because avoidance briefly reduces emotional tension. The nervous system interprets relief as safety, which is why procrastination can become cyclical. The delay creates guilt. The guilt increases emotional pressure. The pressure makes the task feel even heavier, so the mind avoids again. And after enough repetition, people stop trusting themselves. That's usually the part that hurts the most, not the unfinished work, the quiet feeling of becoming unreliable to yourself. But even that reaction has layers people misunderstand, because procrastination is often deeply connected to self-perception. Some people delay things because they fear failure. Others delay because they fear discovering they're actually capable. That sounds contradictory, but both can exist at the same time. Success changes things. It raises expectations, creates visibility, invites comparison, removes excuses. For someone whose nervous system associates attention with pressure, succeeding can feel almost as destabilizing as failing. So the brain hesitates before both. There's also another pattern that rarely gets acknowledged. Many people who procrastinate are unusually imaginative. They can vividly picture possibilities, outcomes, conversations, future versions of themselves. Their minds simulate scenarios constantly, which means they don't just experience tasks practically, they experience them emotionally before they happen. A simple email becomes a potential misunderstanding. A creative project becomes a reflection of identity. A decision becomes 1,000 imagined consequences. Their brain doesn't interact with the task alone, it interacts with everything the task represents. And that mental expansion consumes energy long before action even begins. This is partly why some people feel exhausted before they've technically done anything. Their nervous system has already been rehearsing the emotional impact for hours, sometimes days. And to be clear, this isn't better or worse than other ways of functioning. There are people who move quickly, decide easily, and detach emotionally from outcomes. There are others whose minds process everything more deeply and cautiously. Neither is morally superior. Different nervous systems prioritize different forms of safety. Some prioritize speed. Others prioritize certainty. Others prioritize emotional protection. None of these patterns make someone weak. They simply shape how a person moves through the world. But procrastination does carry a quiet cost, not only in lost time, but in lost presence. Because unfinished things rarely stay still in the mind. They follow people into conversations, weekends, quiet moments. Even moments of rest can feel partially occupied by something unresolved. Which creates an invisible background tension many people become so accustomed to, they stop noticing it entirely. And yet, there's a paradox hidden inside all of this. The same sensitivity that contributes to procrastination is often connected to depth. People who struggle with avoidance are frequently highly reflective, emotionally aware, imaginative, conscientious, internally complex. They don't delay because nothing matters to them. They delay because too many things matter at once. Because their mind assigns significance carefully. Because action feels emotionally loaded. Because somewhere along the way, doing things stopped feeling emotionally neutral. And once a person understands that, something important begins to shift. Not instantly, not dramatically, but enough to soften the shame. Because shame tends to make procrastination worse, not better. The brain rarely becomes calmer through self-attack. Harshness increases threat perception, and threat increases avoidance. Understanding creates more room than criticism ever does. Sometimes what changes people is not learning how to force themselves harder. It's realizing their behavior has been trying to protect them all along, even if imperfectly, even if the strategy no longer helps the way it once did. The nervous system does not create patterns randomly. It adapts. And many behaviors that look self-sabotaging on the surface once served a purpose somewhere earlier in life. That doesn't mean staying stuck forever. It simply means the pattern deserves understanding before judgment. Because when people feel understood internally, they stop fighting themselves so aggressively. And strangely, that's often when movement slowly becomes possible again. Not through pressure, but through safety. So if you've spent years wondering why simple things sometimes feel emotionally heavy, why you delay things you genuinely care about, why rest never fully feels like rest when something unfinished is waiting in the background, there may be nothing wrong with your character at all. Your mind may simply be carrying more emotional meaning than other people can see. And once you begin recognizing that, certain things about yourself start making a little more sense. If this resonated, there are probably other patterns in your life that connect to it too. Quiet ones, the kinds of patterns most people never notice, even while living inside them every day.